I was originally just going to replace the springs because the tire was eating the fender. Now the tire is too big for the car, but I don't think it was that much too big. And the car was sitting lower here on the driver's side. But turns out the spring wasn't broken. It just kind of looks like it is. It's just how they are on the end of them. And then when I took it apart, I discovered it had a lot more problems going on. The control arm was completely wasted. This bushing's junk here. Shocks completely wasted. Who knows how old that thing is. My lower control arm, ball joint I think was okay. But this press-on bushing, yes. I did not remove that with any tools, even when I took it off the first time. Absolutely wasted. The spring perch or saddle, also completely wasted. So that's fun. So I got this side replaced and all done and ready to go. So now I'm going to bring you guys on the journey here and show you how to do this other side. And we can see here that this one is actually worse than the other side. There is no bushing left to speak of. Nope, never mind. There's a little bit of it left. To start, I have the car jacked up on jack stands on a frame rail and some bricks behind the rear tires. Just kidding. There's no bricks back there. I just did the other side unsafe. Well, I'm going to start by getting a little bit of pressure off of this control arm down here because I'm going to remove the shock first. Don't need a lot, just a little bit there. So I'm loosening up the shock bolts and these upper strut tower nuts. Oh boy, that does not want to come off of there. Okay, bigger ratchet, please don't break. There it goes. See, even the bushing for the shock is wasted. So now your shock should be loose and you should be able to get this strut brace up. Or not. Maybe it just needs a little persuasion. The other one just came right off. I think we'll come back to him. So I'm taking out this nut right here. There's one on the other side as well. Now our shock will come out, except for our shock tower brace thing here is kind of stuck. Alright, there was a lot of stress on that. Saw the whole shock tower shift back, so that's probably going to be a fight to get that back on later. The previous owner of this car did whack a deer with it, so that would explain a few things. Anyway, we can move on and get this out of here now. Okay, and then the shock's just gonna come out like that. The reason we did all that first is because I'm going to install the spring compressor on the inside so I can get the spring up, I can remove everything safely, get the spring out of here, put the new spring in, and reassemble everything. So this simply bolts where the shock was. So now I put our shock mount back on. We're going to ignore the fact now that I have a brace that doesn't line up. We're going to go ahead and change the front end and I'll worry about that later. Got another loose one here that I'm going to have to address later as well. But since this is compressing, it'll stay put. Gonna put on this bar here and reinstall the upper shock bolts. Now I'm basically just running these down fairly snug. Once again, this is compressing and sitting down on it, so it's not going to go anywhere. It's just holding it straight. Now we're going to put down our bearing, washer, and the nut. And it saves a lot of time if you compress the spring a little bit like I did with the jack first. Otherwise, you got to turn this the whole way with the wrench. I will have a link to this tool in the description if anybody wants to get one. So now I have the spring compressor compressing the spring a little bit, but I also have the jack holding up the bottom. I'm going to take off the two nuts underneath of this perch right here, so then when I take them out it doesn't drop down and smash my fingers or anything. These bolts for me are 9/16. They're also super tight apparently. There we go. These nuts I'm going to save because the new perch did not come with any. So now when I drop the jack down, this perch should separate from the control arm. Just like that. The spring compressor has the spring safely captured. Yummy! That's super awesome. Alright, let's move on. Next I'm going to remove this caliper and just get it clear out of the way. I'm going to remove this entire steering knuckle, and I don't want to deal with the brake system. Yes, I know it needs replaced, but that'll be a different day. Nothing like baling wire to hold the brakes together. Oh, this was on way too tight. Don't know why they thought they needed baling wire when it was 200 foot-pounds. Ugh, there. Nice to see that there's no cotter pin on the tie rod. The odds of these cotter pins coming out are very low. Try get this back part straight. We're just gonna snip it as close as we can get it and then just ram it off with an impact. Since we're getting new ball joints and new nuts and everything, we're not super concerned about ruining the threads on the way out. Start this a few threads, then try to break taper here by hitting it with a hammer. There we go. Then this nut, just make sure it doesn't come flying off. Next, I'm going to take off this control arm so I can get to the sway bar link and this lower control arm a little bit easier. Comes off with two bolts on the shock tower. So I want to pop off these first two spark plug wires. That is not the right wire for the whatever. It transfers spark, it's fine. Anyway, get out these first two wires so I can get to the bolts a little easier. These bolts are a 3/4. Okay, so now down here, it should just slide out. Let's see if my 3/8 impact can get out the sway bar link. Would have been smarter to have the drill turn the nut. So for this front strut rod here, that holds a control arm, these bolts right here are pressed into it with splines, So if you try to take these out with the socket, you'll break the head off of them. So we have to pull the nut off from the bottom. You know, by hand, when it fell out, there was nothing holding it. So that bushing having memory helps the suspension do its job. And you want to turn the nut because this bolt is for camber adjustment. And if you turn the bolt, it's just going to spin the camber adjustment in and out and not actually remove the bolt. There we go. See, I lost tension and the control arm fell. There, now with this off, we can see how this has an offset washer, special bolt, so we don't want to ruin that. We can get more, but just kind of a pain in the neck. This hole has a flat spot on it, so it only goes on one way. And so the nut simply just tightens it down, but to adjust the camber, you'll turn this bolt and it will turn it in and out for your camber adjustment. And now this control arm should come right out. Before I put the control arm on, I'm going to install this grease zerk. Simply just threads in. Give it a little bit of a tighten here. Not too much, it's just aluminum. Get our protective cap off. Stick our grease gun on here. I'm going to put some grease in it, so we'll see some grease come out. Should be pre-greased. Looks like I'm just making an absolute mess. That's why the zerk ball is stuck. Sometimes you'll have that, press them in with something, get them unstuck. Now we'll see if I can grease it. Looks like I'll have to grease it on a car where I can push up against it and get it to seal better. I'm installing a control arm here, making sure to put the bolt in the same orientation it came out as. Now this part's very important because I'm not going to tighten this all the way down yet. It's going to go most of the way. So you see here the control arm swings freely. I'm going to hold it up a little bit and tighten it down. So here's the importance of this. Wherever you tighten it down, wherever this flexes to afterwards, that bushing has to flex that. So when you tighten this down, this needs to be as close to ride height as you can get it. So see, I push it down, it'll spring back up. So if I have it down here and I tighten it and I bring it all the way up here to have it in its rest position, that bushing is under strain all the time, and then you hit bumps and it's going to strain even further as it goes up, and you're going to wear that bushing out prematurely. So we're going to leave this loose. So it falls on its own, then we'll tighten it. After we get everything back together, I'll put the jack under the control arm, have the car sitting on it, and then I'll tighten it up. But for now, this strut rod will hold it up. The torque spec for these strut rod to lower control arm bolts is 55 to 70. So I'm going to go 68. I always like to go on the higher side of the ranges. Overcome all the rust and other debris that's in the way over the years. I'm going to illustrate how the sway bar link goes on because it'll be hard to see when it's on the car. But we have these cupped washers that will go towards this bushing. You see the bushing has a little step in it on one side and not the other. That is designed to fit inside of the control arm. So those steps will be towards each other. And now you can kind of see the pattern. The nut. Just like that. I had a heck of a time getting the last one on. So what I did was I put the control arm, and you don't want to do this to brake hoses, but we're just going to let it happen today. I'm going to make sure I don't smash my grease zerk. Just going to hit the lip of the control arm here. So I'm going to put some pressure up against it here. Now I'm going to take this big, huge, gigantic pry bar and pry this thing down because you have to squish the bushings to get that to go in there. So you can have enough thread sticking out at the bottom to actually start the nut. Once you get the nut started, you're good. There. go until you see these bushings start to squish out, and then you're good. Now we can lower my floor jack and put it back to holding up my caliper so the hose doesn't break. So now we're down to the spring. So we're just going to unscrew it until it falls out. So I'm going to reuse this spring. I have new plastic bushings here. I found these on Summit Racing. Have the little step here. Get it started there. I had to persuade the other one with a hammer. Yep, there we go.
And then there's a spot up there you can see where the spring actually sits in and around to hold it in place.
And as the spring compresses, it twists a little bit. So we need some lubrication up here to allow the spring to do that. So I'm going to use this white lithium grease. I was going to just use wheel bearing grease, but I found this stuff in my garage in the house that I bought, and I thought I would just go with it because it's kind of funny. Let's see, 1976. And it's surprisingly still very grease-like. So we're going to use it. So the reason I'm greasing it is so when the car bounces up and down, going down the road, and the spring moves back and forth, and this slides like it's supposed to, that's the reason for the bushing, it will be less likely to make noise. The end of the spring has to sit in that little groove right there against that tab. And now we will install it.
And it's kind of a trick and a half getting that spring to actually go where it needs to. Let's get this oriented correctly before we get more tension on it. That will only make things harder. Double check the springs where it needs to be.
Now I'm essentially going to turn this until I can get the upper control arm in. I tried to put this spring in with the upper control arm already there on the other side, and I fought it for about 30 minutes before I decided that it just had to come back out. We might be close enough now. Before I can put the upper control arm in, we need to grease the two bushings here and here. Comes with two grease zerks. And we need to make sure I do this before I install the control arm, because once you install these, you can no longer get to these grease zerks because they'll be in the way of the shock tower. And you could put right angle fittings on them, sure, but this is how you align the car. And so once you turn them, it's not going to line up anymore. There we go. We'll go until we have some grease come out of it. The other side didn't look like it wanted to accept any. Let's make sure this grease zerk is free. Yep, had some pressure in it. Oh, it's on my face. That's why we wear safety glasses. I need this to be turned down some. I have a pipe wrench here I'm going to use to turn this downwards so I can install it. There we go. Oh, there we go. The torque spec for the upper control arm is 75 to 100.
So I'm gonna go, let's see, 97 sounds good. Towards the higher end of the range. I'm gonna raise up the lower control arm. If I have it spaced right, I should be able to raise it directly into the bolt holes. Oh no, it just ruined the bump stop. Oh no. Ew. How gross that is. Okay, that was held on by hopes and dreams, it seems like. Man, that'd have been easier to replace with the spring out of it. Oh well, we're sending it. Now I'm gonna release this into that control arm until I can get these bolts started. My spring perch to the upper control arm is 17 to 25 foot-pounds, so I'm gonna go 23. Oh geez, stick up on that fast. Too much. 24, that's fine, we're gonna leave it. So now I'm not gonna pull off the compressor yet, because I'm gonna put the spindle back on. And what that will allow me to do is then jack up the lower control arm with the floor jack, then compressing this spring through all this motion here. And then I'll be able to take out the compressor by hand instead of turning it the whole way. See if I can get this bottom one to take grease now that I can hold pressure against it. Sometimes they just don't seal. Nope, it is not happy. I'll have to get a new grease zerk and try it again later. Luckily they come with a little bit of grease in them to begin with. As a side note here, if you have to install a caliper with a hammer like I just did, something's wrong. And in this case, the piston's overextended and a rivet's hitting this outside part because this groove is deeper than the rest of this. So this will get fixed later, but keep in mind you shouldn't have to use a hammer if your brakes are functioning properly. I can reinstall my tie rod end. So now I'm using the jack on the lower control arm, and I'm gonna pick the car up here just a little bit. It's off the jack stand right now. So as far as the alignment goes, this bolt was in the center. So I'm gonna put it back. It still needs aligned, but I'm just gonna put it back where it was. So I'm gonna hold it with this wrench and tighten this nut, because this is as close as ride height as we can get without the tire being on it and it sitting on the ground. But since you can't get underneath of it on the ground, this is the best we can do. I guess you could use ramps too, but this is close enough that it will be fine. So now I can take this completely off. So now when I lower this down, everything, oh, a little faster than I meant to there. That's okay, spring settling there. Oh, really settling. Car sitting on a jack stand. We're off the jack. Take out our mounting bolts. I do believe there's spring pressure still against that. I'm going to put the jack back underneath of it. Unbolting the spring compressor now. Let's get our shock put back in. Got to get it through the mount here first. These are the same setup as the sway bar link, where they have this little step on the inside. Those are designed to fit in the hole of the spring saddle right here, so they will sandwich it like this. I find it helpful to put the bushing on the spring perch first, and then you can guide the shock into it. So the bottom, we have rubber bushing, washer, and then nut. this spring insulator right here, I have the other side of it pulled up over the base of the shock here so it can't give any clearances or make the shock crooked. I have the wheel back on. I'm gonna put the car back on its feet and see if I can get this brace back on without prying and pushing on things. Helped a little bit. Ooh, there we go. Get that nut on there before it has a chance to escape. Car's body's doing a little of the flexy on me. Shock is now going to be a little difficult to put together because it's going to be trying to push up on me while I'm trying to put the bolts in. Torque these wheels to 100 foot-pounds. I'm going to go torque the other 3 wheels, and after you drive it for about 20 to 50 miles, you want to recheck them again. Sometimes the wheels metal can compress and the lug nuts can become loose.
This already looks a bazillion times better. It'll have to settle though once it gets driven. Push on it some. But it already is way better. I can already tell that it's fixed. Not gonna go for test drive though. The neighbors probably won't appreciate that right now. It was hailing earlier. Alright, let's see if this garbage will start after sitting for 3 weeks. You can see gas in the fuel filter. Thing's a champion. I just remembered it might run better if it actually had all the spark plugs attached to it. There, the Clevelands are so good you don't even need all 8 cylinders. Let's try that again. It is now about 6 months later. Car has settled a bunch. Currently using it to jump start this other garbage here. Kind of sitting on a hill at the moment, but still sits up high enough to not grind or anything, and all my rattles and bangs are gone.